Thank you for viewing this recording of a free event provided by Next Village San Francisco for our community. Next Village San Francisco is a local nonprofit providing services and support that empowers seniors to live independently in their own homes. We welcome people who want to keep connected with their community as members, volunteers, and supporters. We host 30 to 40 free activities and events each month for the public, and our members have access to our network of volunteers. Learn more and get involved at nextvillagesf.org. We hope you enjoy this video.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to be going for about an hour and a half here, a little bit less than. And like I said, or like she said, Donna said, go ahead and put your questions in the chat. From time to time, I might be taking a sip of water. We can answer a question or two at that point in time. So for today, this is our agenda. We have a lot of information that I want to share with you guys. So I'm going to be going through the slides pretty quickly. You will have access to them afterwards. What we really want to start out with are the basic steps to organizing any decluttering project. That's whether it's a lot of big stuff in a garage, or if it is paper, digital clutter, you name it, we can run it through this process. We're also going to talk about some of the more basic set of challenges that all of us, me included, have had in terms of thoughts that might stymie our progress and what to do about that. Then we're going to briefly jump into some of the ramifications of ADHD, anxiety, depression, and hoarding disorder, and how those work into this framework, so that we can address those needs as well, because they do really affect the organizing process. Then we'll give you a few minutes just for some quiet time to think about what exactly you want to be doing with this information, and then we'll have time for Q&A. Like Donna said, we'll be stopping the recording at that point, so everyone feels free to ask questions. Okay, so let's dive in. So I wanted to give you briefly an idea of who I am, so you know where I got my information from. I started my business about 9.5 years ago, almost a decade, so I've been doing this for quite some time. And in the pandemic era, I became a certified professional organizer. You have to have a certain amount of hours to sit for this exam. It is given by an accredited body, so lots of study involved. And I took this because I wanted to be able to have the most knowledge possible to serve my clients. And then in 2023, I started a training program with ADCA. That is the ADD Coach Academy. And this is one of the most thorough training programs I could find for ADHD coaches. A lot of my clients have ADHD, so I knew this was going to be an additional piece of the puzzle for organizing clients. And then I also work strictly as an ADHD coach for those who want it as well. ICD is the Institute for Challenging Disorganization. And this is an organization where professional organizers and members of the public can take classes, listen to webinars on all sorts of things that are affecting the organizing process. So I have certificates in ADHD, chronic disorganization, and hoarding there. I've attended local and national webinars and conferences related to organizing, to hoarding disorder, to ADHD, and anything related, and read quite a number of books. So this is where I'm pulling all this information from that I'm sharing with you today. So let's really get into this. How do we stop the clutter from continuing to come in, or how do we get rid of the clutter that we do have already? And most people do not want to organize for the sake of organizing, unless you happen to be someone like me in my field. So really, this is about, what do you really want to be doing with your time and your energy? And most likely it's not organizing. So we're organizing so that we can move on and do other things that we want to do in our life. I use the acronym STOP. That's STOP, as an easy way to remember this process that we can go through at any time. And if we get stuck, go back to this process. So if you think of a stop sign, we're going to talk here about sorting, tossing, which includes recycling, shredding, donating, consigning, organizing, and then persevering. So this is the broad process. And so I'll spend a few minutes here talking about these pieces. So the first thing is sorting like with like. So for some people, this is new to them. And I had someone I was working with, and that alone floored them in terms of how much quicker they were able to get through their items, even though it feels a bit counterintuitive at first. Most people will go to a pile of stuff and just try to start making decisions. The challenge is that your brain gets flooded with all sorts of different pieces of information, different items. It's too much to do at once. So if you are sorting the items by category first, it helps you to focus and find a place to start. Additionally, if you are only looking at one category at a time, you really have a lot more idea of what you do have. So, for instance, if you want to go through all of your clothes in your closet, if you're forgetting that you have clothes in two other closets or in the garage, you're probably not going to purge as much as you need to in order to reach your goals. And you might wonder why. So, you're not necessarily going to do all those closets at once, but you want to keep these things in mind. Most of the time, when I go to work with clients, they do have miscellaneous piles. So, the first thing we're going to do is sort and put all the papers together, all the clothes together, all the dishes together, all those different type of broad categories. And then we have a better sense of the volume that we're working with. So then we move into the second phase, which is toss or throw away. This also includes consigning. This includes donations, recycling, shredding, and trash. So this part of the process is typically hardest for most of my clients, which is why they do come to me for help. It can be really difficult to let go of certain things. We'll address that in a later slide, but this is one of the most important pieces of the process. If you can have, let's say, a kitchen cupboard, and maybe you have 20 pots and pans. I use this example a lot. If you have to constantly pull out 19 pots and pans to get to the 20th one in the back, you're either never going to use it or never put it away, right? So unless you are truly using 20 pots and pans, most of my clients are not, then you want to reduce what you have there in terms of volume. I could go into someone's home and have a blast organizing the whole place without their input. But it's not going to do any good because I would probably get rid of things that they want to keep and vice versa. So it's important that you're thinking through this process in terms of what's going to work for you specifically. And then we get to the organizing phase. This is the piece most people are familiar with because of the media, because of the TV shows that have been on for a while, where they bring in the bins and everything looks pretty and everything is cordoned off and all the bins are perfectly separated. It's TV. I don't do that type of organizing because I want to set people up for success living in their day-to-day environment. So it is important though, once we have decided, okay, these are what I'm going to keep, what do we do with them? Where am I going to keep them? And do I need some sort of container? Now, I do try to reuse containers with my clients. Most of the time, we are getting rid of enough that we are unearthing all sorts of different containers. A container could be a traditional bin, plastic bin, a basket, but it could also be a bookshelf, or it could be uh, other types of shelving units or wardrobe, a dresser. Those are all containers as well. So not just the type you would see at the container store. So in terms of that, where are things going to live? I like to use the analogy of a street address. So if you went out today, went out to get coffee, went to a meeting. I heard there was a book club meeting today with Next Village. If you went to any of those places, presumably you are now back at home. And so most likely I don't believe any of you walked 3 doors down and randomly opened that door to go in, right? That typically not the case. You're going right back to your street address when you're done. So it's the same thing with your stuff. Everything in your home needs a street address to go back to so that it has that home so that you can find it again later. And the more that you're able to get rid of in that second step, the easier this third step is because you're not having to battle too many items in one place, or you're not one apple away from upsetting the whole cart. You have wiggle room there. And in terms of the containers, like I said, we try to reuse as much as possible. So that is one of the things that I actually have people hold on to during that second phase when they're throwing things away, because we can reuse them. There are always caveats if it's broken, or if it, for instance, it's a dresser and the drawers are really hard to get in and out. Those are just going to be impediments to maintaining order. So those things can go. But if they're perfectly good, we'll hold off till the end to get rid of them because we might be able to use them in a different or a new way. Then this last step is persevering. As long as we're alive, we're bringing things into the home. So if we're not getting things out of the home, then we're going to be swimming upstream and we're not going to be able to maintain that order. Now, having said that, there are times when things will happen. We might get an injury, we might get sick, we might be laid up for a few weeks, or have to go out of town unexpectedly. So things are going to fall off. Things are going to get messy again. That is just life. We're not going for perfection here. But the good news is that if you have gone through these steps thoroughly enough, then the maintenance and getting back to your baseline is going to be a lot easier because you've got the structural bones in place to come back to. You're not going to have to reinvent the wheel unless you don't maintain order for a year or more, or 5 years. You might have to go back through. But as long as you still got some of the remnants of the system here, it's going to be easier than it did the first time around. So this is the sorting process. You can use this again for paperwork. So if I'm working with people in papers, I will sort by broad categories. And I don't necessarily have to know what the papers mean, but I can have a category of financial papers and a category of memorabilia and a category of medical and house related purchases and things like that. So you can do those broad categories. And then once you get into the phase where you're letting things go, that second phase, you can do smaller categories. You just want to make sure you don't do too many categories. A lot of people micro categorize, which means there's only 1 or 2 items in every category, and then everything becomes special, and it's a lot harder to get rid of those items, right? If you have 10 t-shirts and they're all a different color of blue, if you put them each in a different category, then every single blue t-shirt is going to be really difficult to let go of. Whereas if you just have a category for blue t-shirts and you leave it at that, it's going to be easier. So I'm going to pause here for just a moment to see if there are any questions or anything coming up in the chat. Probably not quite yet, but I just want to double check.
So I'm just going to give you some of the stuff out of the chat. So yes, the slides will be shared later. And then we've been told it's good to hear about gathering all the same kind of things together first. That's what I've started doing. Well done, Anne. Ruby has a question about during COVID, organizations stopped receiving donations. So she would like to know if they've started again or if there are some restrictions.
Things are going back up again with donations, which is fabulous. Much better than it was even in 2021, 2022. Now, having said that, there are things that are different with the entire life cycle of products. Even with recycling, it's slightly different post-pandemic. And some places that were available before are not taking the same type of things, but the vast majority of places that I worked with before the pandemic are taking donations again now. It's a great question.
And while we're still on this slide, when you get to toss, how do you decide what to keep versus recycle, shred, etc.?
Okay. So if we're talking about papers in particular, I'm assuming because they're talking about shredding, um, I will say one thing that trips up a lot of my clients, if you have a piece of paper and the only identifying information is your address, that does not need to be shredded. A lot of people will shred that. But that information, if you gave me your name, I could probably Google and in 2 minutes could find your address sitting there on one of the many websites that retains this information. Um, if there are any papers, excuse me, that have credit card numbers, full credit card numbers, account numbers, I usually like to shred those. And if you're getting into receipts that date back to like the early 2000s and before that, I typically shred the vast majority of those when I'm working with clients because back in the day, if you remember those card readers where they had to manually swipe it, um, you have entire credit card numbers listed. And even though you might not have that account anymore, identity theft can still happen. Identity theft can still happen even if someone has passed away and those accounts are not valid anymore. They can kind of come back to life. So anything with account numbers, I shred. Um, and in terms of what to get rid of and what to keep, uh, that can really depend upon what type of paper it is. And I don't tell my clients generally you could wholesale, you could toss all these, get rid of these because a lot of times there are tax ramifications or legal ramifications for doing that. So I have people talk with their lawyer or their CPA. And I could give you examples where the general status did not work for one of my clients, and it wasn't something that I would have ever known about, but they had found out when they were trying to purchase a home. So um, that's the best answer that I can give there. Any other questions popping up?
And then still related to this one and papers, how to gather things like papers when they are scattered all around the house in different boxes, files, etc.
Yes. So it depends on how much space you have. If I was in person with someone, the good news is there's lots of ways you can do it. There's no right or wrong way. You just want to get started. For some people, that might mean solely dealing with the papers in one room and getting those situated and then moving on to other areas. So for instance, if you have papers on your desk and you really want to be able to focus, you might work with those first and later on go to the papers that are in banker's boxes in the garage. They don't all have to happen at the same time. If there are not too many papers, you could go around in 15-minute segments during commercials when you're watching TV, and just gather those all up together and put those boxes or those baskets into one area. But if it's going to make a room inaccessible, you might not want to do that. So you might need to repeat the process when you come across different areas that have the same category.
And then the next two questions we will hold, it is about the names of the organizations that you were mentioning, and then also about what do we do about diaries and other special stuff, because I think that's coming up in a future slide.
Yes, 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 it is. And if I don't specifically mention diaries and journals, you can remind me because that's a good example. Okay, so moving right along here. Um, Now we know what the steps are, right? We know how to quote unquote stop. But there's a lot more to the equation here. There's all these different reasons why we might be keeping things. So this was listed in the newsletter as the advertisement for this presentation. And I'm sure most of you could relate. I can relate to a lot of these as well. We all can, I think, on some level. So um, I maybe cannot lift things as much as I used to be. So that's going to be an impediment to going through this process. Or perhaps I'm not driving anymore, so I can't get to donation sites. We're going to go through all of these. I can't give this away. It's special to me. My mom gave it to me and related. If I can't get rid of it because my kids might want it. It's too valuable to give away. I spent so much money on it. It'd be a waste if I did give it away. What about landfill? I'm going to find the perfect place to donate it to, or I found that place. I haven't gotten around to it yet. just in case, for now. Where do I start? And I'm overwhelmed. So there's all these different reasons. That's why this guy's not smiling right now, because he is overwhelmed with all these different reasons to keep the items. And these are some of the most common things that come up when I am working with clients. So let's dive into these to see if we can't find some ways to balance out these gut level reactions that start and sometimes stymie our projects, projects and process. So this first one, and the second one, really, I can't lift things as easily anymore, I'm not driving anymore, so I can't get to donation sites. Donna has already mentioned this. If you are a Next Village member, volunteers can help out with this. That's huge. That alone, when I found that out, when she told me, I said, that's worth the price of admission, because I do donation drop-offs for clients, but I charge for time, because it is a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of places to go to, and it can be challenging sometimes. So that is hugely valuable. So the village is there to help you with that piece. This is a big one. I can't give this item away. My mom gave it to me, or my sister, my kid gave it to me. Whoever it is, it's special. You feel guilt in terms of giving it away. This can stop a lot of us. This happened to me with something too, and thankfully, my mother had said, "Don't worry about it. Get rid of it." Right. So most of the time, we are going to have people in our lives who give us things, and as one of the books, organizing books put it, most people do not say, "Here is this gift. Happy birthday. Here's this gift. May you be burdened with it for the rest of your life and eternity. You must keep it," right? There might be a few people who do that, but for the most part, really what people are trying to do when they give something to you is to show their appreciation and love. And so that gives you an out in terms of how long you have to keep that item, especially if it's not useful or you don't like it. Um, Marie Kondo has a really nice way of dealing with this as well. In one of her books, she talks about the fact that the object has served its purpose the moment that that person gave it to you. In that moment, they showed you their love or their appreciation or their thanks. And that might be as long as that object has to stay in your life. It has already done its job potentially, and it doesn't need to stay with you anymore. So I think that's a really neat way to put this whole guilt thing on its head and to give you a little bit of leeway to get rid of those items. And then related to that is, I can't get rid of it. I have family members or kids who are going to want these things. And this one's, I think, a little bit easier for a lot of people now, because there have been so many articles written where the headline literally says, "Your kids don't want your stuff," right? So this one is a little bit easier now. But it can be difficult to let go of things. And one thing I will say is, for the vast majority of items in your home, the reality, and sometimes harsh reality, is that other people are not going to value your items as much as you do. Shocking, right? It's really one of those truths that kind of hurts a bit, but it is true. So if you can keep that in mind, it might be easier to let those things go. And then this one is huge in terms of, it's too valuable to give it away, right? I spent a lot of money on it. There's value here. This comes up quite a bit with my clients, and I've fallen prey to this myself, sometimes even during client sessions. So we want to watch out for this one. A lot of people will go onto eBay, for instance, and they will type in, "What is, oh, this vintage chair I have, it's got to be worth so much money." And they plug it in, and boom, oh my gosh, there's like 10 results, and people are asking $500. I'm going to get $500 for this chair. That's amazing, right? The challenge, though, is that people are not filtering the results by what actually sold. So this is going to be a little bit different either on your iPhone or your Android. And it's going to look different if you're on your computer doing this. You need to filter those results by what actually sold. And so the amount, $500 for a chair, all of a sudden could go down to $20 or $50 what it was actually sold for, or maybe none of the items sold. And it can be really eye-opening. And like I said, this just happened to me last week. This client had some really neat vintage items, and I was curious. So I plugged it into eBay. I filtered it by sold. Nope, not worth nearly as much as I thought it was. So again, it just goes to show you that there's not always things that are worth our time. Now, there might be certain things that are definitely valuable, and then you could consign them or you could sell them. What I would caution you though here is it is work to sell items, especially if you're going to sell online, and most definitely if you're going to ship. It is a lot more work than most people think. So when I'm working with clients, um, I will help them post things on Craigslist and other places for free, that they're giving away for free, that a donation site maybe will not take. But um, if they're going to try to sell something, a lot of times it's not worth their time because they have to take photos. Those photos have to be good. They have to know how to upload the photos onto the website or onto the app. Then they have to create the ad, so to speak, for it. Then they have to post it, and then they have to wait for all these responses, and they have to get back to all these people. And the flake factor is unfortunately much higher than it used to be pre-pandemic. A lot of people do flake out. So then you're going back and forth and getting excited, and then things are not happening. So a lot of times when I'm working with clients, they have a pile of stuff that they want to sell that just starts collecting dust and sits there for months on end because realistically, it's not worth their time to do that. And then related to that is I spent so much money on it. If I got rid of this, it would be so wasteful. And this is more like a regret type purchase. And this can be very challenging because you might have spent quite a bit of money to purchase this item. And if you got rid of it, you would be admitting that this purchase was a mistake and perhaps a costly one. And that does not feel comfortable. So a lot of people will keep things around because they're at least then they feel like they have the option to use it at some future date, so they won't feel so bad. The challenge with this, or a different way to think about this, which turns this whole thing on its head, is thinking about the Bay Area and property values. And how much are you paying in the home that you either rent or you own, and maybe there's a mortgage or property taxes, what have you? How much are you paying per square foot? And so what you can do is all these items that were mistake purchases, they go into a pile, and it might be quite a big pile if it was maybe exercise equipment or something. You put them all together, multiply that square footage by how much you're paying per square foot for your space, and all of a sudden those items, it becomes obvious that they're continuing to cost you money every single month that you keep them. And if you multiply it by multiple years, all of a sudden those items are becoming way too expensive to keep. So that is another way to think about it. Your space is really valuable, especially here in the Bay Area. So that's a good way to think about it. I want to pause again here. If there's one question, I can take it and we can keep going with these.
I just want to say it's great in the chat because people are answering questions for each other. So that is fantastic. And just on the special items, in addition to diaries, photo albums.
Yes. So typically with photos, and there are, I'll say a few things here. There are organizers like me who only deal with photo organizing. So it is their joy to go through your photos and organize them and potentially put them in scrapbooks or what have you. And the website, I believe, is changed to thephotomanagers.com. So there are people who do that. Now, I have gone through photos with a few of my clients before. I don't recommend doing that first unless it is there's some deadline tied to it, or they're the only thing you have to organize, because these are going to take you down memory road, and they are mostly, or a lot of them at least, are going to be sentimental, and they can be some of the hardest things to let go of. So if you can get rid of other things first in your home that really don't mean as much to you, by the time you get to the photos, it's going to be a lot easier because your decision-making muscle is going to be a lot stronger. And I'll give you one anecdotal experience, and that's my own. Years ago, I had lived overseas when I was younger for a half a year, and I took a ton of photos. And so when I went through those photos, I started by just going through and throwing away the blurry photos, the photos of people that were not in my life anymore, and they were maybe friends or acquaintances at the time. It didn't matter to me anymore. Um, if there were 10 different pictures of the same event or the same landmark, just by getting rid of all those, I reduced my volume, which was pretty big, by half, just by half. I didn't do anything else at that point in time. I didn't make scrapbooks or do anything else. And that alone was a huge weight off of my shoulders. So that's one of the ways that you can get started. Great
And
question.
yeah, one of the suggestions from Valerie's is if you have older photos or historical photos, there's a history center at San Francisco Public Library on the 6th floor. So they
Right.
are interested in old documents, old photos. So again, you could see if others can enjoy them.
Yes.
Uh,
I
And
I would say one caveat to be careful of, though, is a lot of people will think that every piece of paper from a particular era is historical. And a lot of times they find that even museums and things can't use all of those. So we want to be careful, especially if they have mold on them.
and then Anne wants to know about getting rid of stuff. Hold on, let me just read this. For people who have died, how do you uh, get rid of stuff that represents a connection to them?
Yes. So that kind of goes to this one where my mom gave it to me, or perhaps you had to do an estate clear out. And I've done some of those in my day as well. And it can be challenging because these are connections to the past. And sometimes that person going through the estate items has been tasked with holding various generations worth of stuff. I'm thinking back to a particular example where I actually helped a colleague, and um, it was an estate clear out, and her client, um, I felt a lot of angst for them because they had, I think it was 4 different generations worth of furniture and things in their home that just couldn't possibly be used in one home. But my guess is they had felt very responsible for them. So if you are clearing out someone's home, obviously you're going to get rid of the trash, hazmat, all those easy things first. And then in terms of furniture and things like that, it really does depend how many people are involved. Are there other family members who might want some things? If so, it gets a little bit more complicated. But if it's just you alone clearing out someone's estate and there's no one else to give items to, you can look at the things as collections. Again, you're going to that sort phase. So for instance, maybe there's 3 sets of chairs. You look at those chairs together as a category and decide which ones you like the most. And then you can do donations. There are websites like maxsold.com, and I have helped some people prepare for those auctions. They are online auctions. You have to take the photos yourself or pay someone to take the photos, and you have different lots, and then people will come on a certain day to your home to pick up things that they won in that auction. Okay, so let's keep moving on here. This other one is I don't want to add to landfill. This is a huge one that a lot of my clients do deal with. We're in the Bay Area. A lot of people like to be green. That's a great value set. But like every single value in life, it can tip the scales and go from being beneficial to go into the extreme and not so beneficial. And you can have competing values. So for instance, maybe you're trying to divert things from landfill, but you also value family and friends, and you haven't been able to have people over to your home for 5 years because you have too much stuff to get rid of. So those two values are really competing, and one has to rise to the surface for you to be able to take some action. We want to watch out for perfection here. That will really throw a lot of people off. A lot of us organizers will tell our clients, I'm going to give you a gimme. So I'm giving you permission, and you could give it to yourself, to let go of more things than you typically would into landfill. Now, we're still trying to recycle and divert what we can, but we do not want to get stuck in this part of the process. We do not want your home to become a recology center. That's not doing anyone any good. So you've got to have a balance there in terms of what you're willing to let go of. Because if you get stuck here, then you're never going to reach the goals and get to the other side. You want to pay attention here to things that might be too difficult to try to divert from landfill. So it's all really about keeping those values in mind and working towards your end goals. The biggest thing you can do here actually is to watch what is coming into your home on the front end. So all those impulse buys, if you can slow your brain down long enough to think about the life cycle of the product, you're going to do much better, because you're not going to be bringing in as many objects. So when you're looking at this item you want to take home, and you've got this value of diverting from landfill, you can stop and think, okay, what's the life cycle of this item? How am I going to get rid of it when it finally does break or disintegrates or rips or what have you? And there's going to be a pain point in the future to buying this item. So that doesn't mean you have to be a minimalist, but it's just a good perspective to have to help you bring less in on the front end, so you don't have to deal with this much on the back end. And this one happens quite frequently to my clients too, is I am going to find the perfect place to donate something to, but I just haven't found it yet. And a lot of times my clients might know, sometimes they might know of places that I don't know of yet. And that's great. And I can take donations for people. The challenge, though, is how much time and energy are you going to devote to finding that quote unquote perfect home versus continuing the decluttering process and reaching your goals. So a lot of times people will get stuck here, and they will spend most of their free time, and more importantly, most of their energy, going down a rabbit hole trying to find that perfect place to donate to, instead of clearing out an entire room or clearing out an entire set of drawers. They could have been much further along in the process. And then related to that is folks who have found the perfect place to donate to, but they just haven't gotten around to it yet. I have lost count of how many times I've been in individuals' homes, and they have a special donation that is collecting dust, and it continues to collect dust unless we address it as we're working together. A lot of times this is because it is too difficult, or there are too many steps involved, and it's not actually the perfect location. And this is why it's not getting out of the house. So I kind of make light of it and say, okay, if this donation center is only open the third full moon of the year, and it has to be raining, and maybe lightning has to be coming down, if that's the only time they accept the donations, it's not going to happen. So let's give up the ghost then and move on to a plan B. So you want to watch out for perfectionism in both of these areas, because they will take you off track. And this one is huge. This has happened to me as well, but I might need it someday. I'll keep it just in case, right? These three words are diabolical as far as organizing is concerned. They're very tricky. As soon as you hear yourself say just in case, you want to pause here and think about what is really going on. Typically, what happens with the clients I work with is there's so many just in case objects and these potential future uses that it is crowding out their ability to live in the concrete here and now. So if you pulled all your just in case items together, it might take up an entire area that you would much rather be using to host dinners, to have people over, to sit down and read or do a craft project. So watch out for these just in cases because they do crowd out your space pretty quickly. And related to this is I'll keep it just for now. Again, watch out for those words for now. I'll just place it down here for now. Typically what is happening there is sometimes it can be that they are not able to make the decision and for very valid reasons, but a lot of times it's because we are uncomfortable with making the decision, or the decision itself is uncomfortable. So we delay that decision, put it down to come back to later. Now, sometimes that's okay, but for the vast majority of the time, our decision-making muscle is not strong enough yet. So we really need to work that muscle and get used to making uncomfortable decisions. That doesn't mean we throw everything out, but we have to rip off the Band-Aid somehow. So if you notice that you're saying for now quite a bit, that's a clue that you might be avoiding a decision that needs to be made. And then where do I start? This one stops a lot of people because they get overwhelmed. Luckily, we went over that stop methodology. And so you could start with sorting, or if you're stuck, you could start with just getting trash out of the house, or getting out things that you know can very easily be donated that you don't want. And that can help with the overwhelm. So these are, again, some of the most common reasons why people have a hard time letting go and what you can do about it. So hopefully that has helped you really see a little bit better what you can do when those gut level reactions come up and how you can challenge them so that that first reaction is not always your end reason, especially if it's not a valid reason. And the validity really just has to make sense to you, no one else, or people who live in your home with you. Okay. Are there any questions again before we dive into some of these special considerations?
I'm just going to let people know that I have seen their questions, and there's some that are very specific to how do we deal with collections? How do we deal with artwork? So I know Judith has quite a few more slides on some of the impediments that get us from starting. So I want to make sure she has time to cover that. And then also donation center names, liquidation places, how to get rid of electronics. So again, I know you've got a lot more to go, Judith. And just one quick simple thing I want to suggest, how to digitize photos. So there are services and there's like Groupon where you can get deals and stuff. But one thing I've started doing at my family, with my parents, is I take my smartphone and I've started taking pictures of the pages, of scrapbook pages, because then I've got the memories there and it's quick and easy. And I can do it while, we're binge watching something.
Yep, that's a great one. And you can even do recording so people can talk through what all these photos are if there are not if there's not anything written about what it is, so that information is not lost. But yeah, that's a great way to do it. I won't get too much into detail here, if at all, about resources. I do work, that's a benefit of working with me as a paid client. I will say, for e-waste, Best Buy does take them if you go to their customer service. Now you've got to be careful with what the e-waste is. You can go to their website to see what items they do take, but they do take those for free. So that is a great one. And hazmat, for instance, Recology, if you have enough, you can do a pickup. And everyone in San Francisco gets at least currently, 2 free bulky pickups per year. So make sure you're taking advantage of those. Auction houses, there are so many. If you're looking to go the cheaper route, there's Max Sold online. There's also Machans. There's all sorts of different ones there. I won't get into that too much because typically most attendees already know about those or can help each other out with those, or they've already spent perhaps too much time trying to find the perfect place to donate to. These other areas are usually where people get tripped up the most. Okay, so special considerations here. These are some that come into play quite a bit with people I work with. So ADHD, hoarding disorder, anxiety, and depression. So we'll start with ADHD here. And we're going to go over the slide very briefly. This is Thomas E. Brown's model of executive functioning, and he is a researcher and clinician who works in the field of ADHD. He's written books on this, worked in the field for many, many years. This is his framework he came up with to help explain what's going on for those who have ADHD. So we have these things called executive functions. These are things like remembering to get the milk when we're at the store, or remembering um, that we need to drop something off, or focusing long enough to finish a project, or organizing information enough that we can get started. So there are all these different areas that come into play with this thinking that happens in the front part of our brain. And any number of these can be affected by those who have ADHD. And not simply ADHD. Obviously, there's memory and there's other issues here too. Depression, there's a lot of overlapping symptomology here. But with folks who have ADHD, they could be dealing with any one of these number of challenges, and they are situational as well, which can make it, excuse me, quite quite confusing for people who do not have ADHD when they're working with them, because they might say, well, you were able to focus really well on that thing that was fun for you, and now you can't focus on this other thing at all. You're not doing it. Well, ADHD has been described as a condition of interest. So if something is high interest, then the person with ADHD is going to be able to jump on it. They're going to be able to focus. They're going to be able to get started very easily because it's of interest to them. When something, on the other hand, is boring, it's like nails on a chalkboard, and it's much harder to get started than it is for someone who does not have ADHD. Now, getting started on boring tasks is hard for everyone, but it's infinitely harder for those who do have ADHD. And so you get the situational variability where sometimes they can do something if it's interesting, other times the same type of task they can't do for something that is boring. So you can go to his website to look this up. He has written books. He's got some really interesting books that explain this. His website does a good job of better explaining this as well. So what do we do with ADHD? These are just some brief things that I'll talk about. Connecting emotionally to your why, that can be very helpful. So Dr. Russell Barkley, and Thomas Brown, Dr. Brown, have talked about the fact that emotion dysregulation is not part of the DSM criteria for ADHD, but it's some of the most common complaints for people coming into their practices, having difficulty with reining in their emotions. They have big feelings. So you can flip that. And if you can emotionally connect to why you need to do something, or not why you need to do something, but why you want to do something, you're more likely to get started. So if decluttering and organizing is painfully boring, try connecting to your values or to your why to make it more interesting. And breaking it down until it's ridiculously easy. This is very important. If it doesn't feel ridiculous, perhaps it's not easy enough or small enough as an action to start with. You can use themes. So let's say you love crafting and you love Michael's or Joanne's. You can organize your space in the theme of that place that you love so much. So you can play around with themes quite a bit. And resparkleizing, this is a word coming from one of my instructors at ADCA. I didn't make it up myself, but I don't have a better word for it yet. When things get dull, they need to be refreshed. They need to be re-energized. So you can resparkleize it in different ways. So this might be using Post-it notes in different colors, or moving them to different places, or turning the ringer to a different ringtone when you need to remember that it's time to spend 15 minutes decluttering so that you actually hear it. I have spoken with a few different people who have said that minimalism saved their bacon as far as their ADHD was concerned. The less visual stuff you have around you, the less interruptions you're going to have internally with your thoughts, and the better you will be able to focus. There's all sorts of task apps, planners, timers, all sorts of things like that that you can use. I'm not going to get into that. And then also making sure you do have support on an ongoing basis, right? So this could be an ADHD coach like myself. It could be a therapist if you're dealing with the fallout of perhaps years or even decades of having ADHD and not realizing you had it, and your self-esteem has taken a big hit because of those unmanaged symptoms. You can also work with certified professional organizers, and excuse me, my voice is going a little bit. Cleaners, some of my clients have cleaners come on a regular basis to help them with those tasks. You can use body doubles, which is having someone come over and they're not going to help you declutter, but during that time that you're going to declutter, they just sit there quietly and read a book or something like that, and it makes it a lot easier to get that task done. There are entire companies based off of this concept. You can also barter with some friends. So that is ADHD, as far as we'll go there. And then in terms of hoarding disorder, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I could do an entire presentation on hoarding disorder alone, but I wanted to put up the criteria for having hoarding disorder. So there are criteria that have to be met, and I am not, I'm well versed in hoarding disorder as far as organizing goes, but I'm not a clinician. I cannot diagnose. This was pulled from a wonderful book, Buried in Treasures. The notes are at the bottom. But you have to have a persistent difficulty discarding or parting with possessions, regardless of their value. And this difficulty is due to a perceived need to save the items and distress associated with discarding them. So that emotional distress. The symptoms result in an accumulation of possessions that congest, reading this verbatim, congest and clutter active living areas and substantially compromise their intended use. And the hoarding causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. And excessive acquiring may or may not be part of it. So I've worked with people who have hoarding disorders who are not bringing more stuff into the home, but they already have so much in the home that they still need help to deal with that. And also there's either good or poor insight, meaning most people who have hoarding disorder do not realize that they have it. And this can be really challenging for family members and friends who are trying to help out. I work with people when they are out of that, when they have insight, when they know what's going on. But there is help available for those who have poor insight as well. So what are some of the things we can do here for hoarding disorder? BIT is Buried in Treasures. It is a book written by some of the leading experts in the field of hoarding disorder. And it's one of the best books out there, I think, in terms of helping to understand what's going on for you with the hoarding and collecting behaviors. And a slew of exercises that you can go through to feel better about letting things go and challenging those emotions as they come up. There's also periodically a sprinkling of some paragraphs for family members who are trying to help out. For instance, you might think this is the best thing to do to help this person, when in actuality, that is actually the worst thing to do for this person. So there's help on that as well. There are, throughout the country, there are programs based off of this book. It's so good. It's been studied at, I believe it was UCSF with the Mental Health Association of San Francisco. And it's some of the best help available for people who have Buried in Treasures. They're peer-led groups, clinician-led groups, and there are some organizers who lead, professional organizers who lead these groups too. It's a 20-week program. There are some shorter 16-week programs. And a lower barrier of entry support is Clutterers Anonymous. There are calls all the time, every week, multiple times a week. You can do it online, you can do it in person. And that is like a drop-in, so you don't have to commit to a longer program. I will say that for the people who have either gone through the Buried in Treasure program or repeat going through that program and practicing and or are in Clutterers Anonymous groups, they have much more success than those who are just trying to white knuckle it alone and with me. So I cannot express enough benefit of these groups. And also getting support. There are therapists you can work with. There are not very many who are specialized in hoarding disorder. Um, there are some wonderful ones here in the Bay Area you could work with. You could also work with a therapist if they don't know it, but perhaps introduce the book to them and ask them if they would be willing to go through the book and the exercises with you. You can again connect to your values, try to make those more important and stick with those as close as possible. And the downward arrow exercise, I'm not going to get into that, but you can Google it. There's YouTube videos about it. Essentially, you are drilling down on what's the worst thing that would happen if you got rid of this thing, and could you live with it? And challenging that, because most people would say, I'm going to feel like a level 10 of discomfort, and that feeling is going to be there forever. And you challenge that, and what people find is that discomfort level goes down much more quickly than they thought it would. And so you're exposing yourself to that ability to let go, the same as you would with exposure exercises to experiment with letting go of things. So again, specialized therapists, decluttering with a certified professional organizer who knows hoarding disorder. And you want to find someone who is trained in this. And then we're going to dive into here anxiety, and then we'll briefly touch on depression. So I do have a lot of clients who are dealing with anxiety, and it might be because they're just overwhelmed with the process. It could be they're not used to making decisions to let things go. They're just really worried about what's going to happen. So one of the first things I will do if someone is quite anxious, and if they're willing to do it, is we'll do an experiment with a breathing exercise. The one I happen to like is 4-7-8, where you breathe into the count of 4, hold it to the count of 7, and breathe out to the count of 8, and then you repeat it. You don't want to get lightheaded. Don't repeat it that many times. But the point is, you are slowing down your breathing enough, especially on the exhale, that it is forcing part of your nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, to slow down, which forces your anxiety to lower. And I have done this in the beginning. I'm thinking of one client in particular who was quite nervous and was willing to try this exercise, and immediately felt much more relaxed about us going through the process. And you can do this throughout the day and practice it all the time, so that when you are more anxious, this can help. You can think about times when you were courageous. It might not be related to letting go or organizing or downsizing, but there are other times in your life where you had these moments where you're incredibly proud of what you did. And you can tap into that and bring that feeling forward in dealing with the things that you're the process of decluttering now. Watch out for perfectionism. This is a big one. If you are feeling that something has to be all or nothing, it has to be perfect or not at all, then you're going to feel anxiety around it most likely. And that's just not a fun way, or really a good way, to organize and downsize and get rid of items you don't want. Again, there's that downward arrow exercise. And again, support here. So if the anxiety is bad enough, you might need to call in a therapist or a counselor or a support group. And CPOs, or certified professional organizers, have more experience with this. Again, if the anxiety is too high, then you really want to make sure you are addressing that first before you declutter, especially if you're paying someone, because it can be a lot more expensive if the anxiety is getting in the way. That's not to say we're not anxious at all, but we just have to have it low enough that we can do the work. And then with depression, I took a survey of my notes before a few years ago, and literally 50% of everyone who called me to get help was dealing with depression on one level or another. So this is incredibly common. And so some of the things that you can do or try to do is suspend disbelief and thinking that you're not going to be able to do it, or you can't let go of those items. That first gut level reaction needs to be challenged. and just get started very imperfectly. Just start somewhere. It doesn't matter where. This is one of the hardest things for people with depression to do, is to get started. But all the literature says that once you do get started, it will get easier, so that motivation can build upon itself. And you want, again, take such small steps that it feels ridiculous. One of the books that I read about habit formation, the author talked about flossing his teeth and literally flossing one tooth every day. That's it. Sounds ridiculous, right? But that's what got him to eventually floss every single tooth in his mouth, because it started incredibly, it was almost as easy to do it as to not do it. So that's a good way to get started. Watch your self-talk. And a lot of my clients are beating themselves up about their situation, and that doesn't really help with motivation. So try talking to yourself the way your best friend would if they came over and helped you. And then again, support teams, a lot of the same support teams here. So here we're gonna stop.
Thank you for viewing this Next Village video recording. We hope you enjoyed it. Please help us spread the word and tell friends and neighbors about Next Village events and services for seniors and adults with disabilities in San Francisco. Visit our website to learn more about our vibrant, growing network, as well as to view our calendar of upcoming Zoom and in-person events and activities in San Francisco. Our website is nextvillagesf.org. Contact us to join our email list to learn about events and resources for seniors in San Francisco. And subscribe to the Next Village YouTube channel by clicking the button below.